My wife left me because her mother told her I would never amount to anything. She called me a failure, said I wasn't worthy of her daughter, and convinced Marina to end our marriage. The settlement took everything. The $3.8 million house I built with years of sweat and sacrifice, gone. The life I was building felt erased. 6 months later, barely holding myself together in a rundown apartment, there was a knock at the door. A lawyer stood there, with a black briefcase. He looked me in the eye and said, "Your ex-wife's father wants to meet you. He has something that belongs to you." I didn't know what to think. When I saw what was inside that briefcase, my chest tightened and for a moment I couldn't breathe. For years I believed I was building something solid, not just for myself, but for Marina and the future we'd planned. I was a construction man, not a man of grand words. I worked with my hands, ran crews and made sure houses stood up to storms. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest and it fed my family. When I met Marina, I thought I'd found a partner in every sense. She had a quiet grace and a confidence that turned heads. I loved her right away. From the start, though, I felt her mother's cold scrutiny. Dahlia Crestwood valued bloodlines, status and reputation. To her I was a man in muddy boots, rough hands, nothing more. I remember an early Thanksgiving when I tried to tell a story about a house I was building for a young family. Marina smiled, but Dahlia laughed and said, "A man who spends his life hammering nails will never bring you the life you deserve. Don't waste your best years waiting for him to grow into something he cannot be." I swallowed my pride, smiled, and poured more wine, but her words burned. For a while Marina defended me. She said she loved me and we had a future. I believed her. We bought a home in California, and as the business grew I put everything into making it our sanctuary. Eventually it became a mansion worth nearly $4 million, perched where on clear mornings you could see the ocean. Every brick and plank felt like a piece of me. Proof, I told myself, that Dahlia was wrong. But money and houses can't fix something poisoned from the inside. Dahlia never stopped whispering to Marina. Over time, Marina started echoing her phrases. "You work too much. Why don't we have more? You'll never be like the men Mother knows." I tried to brush it off and remind her we were building this together, but her patience faded. My mother, Irene, saw it before I did. A gentle, church-going woman, she would squeeze my hand and say, "Ethan, you are enough. Don't let that woman make you doubt yourself." My younger brother Caleb warned me too. "She's not standing with you, brother. A wife should be on your side." I wanted to believe Marina loved me enough to fight, so I ignored the signs. When the divorce papers came, it hit me like a blow. Marina stood in the kitchen of the house I'd built and said it was over. No tears, no hesitation, as if she'd rehearsed it. "Mother was right, Ethan. You'll never be more than a failed dreamer. I can't keep living like this." My knees almost buckled. I wanted to scream, to ask how she could walk away from everything we built. But her eyes told me the decision had been made long before. The hearings were brutal. Dahlia sat in the courtroom, chin high, as lawyers tore my life apart. Marina walked away with almost everything: the mansion, the savings, the cars. I was left with debts, scraps, and a hollow chest. Leaving that courthouse, watching her drive away in a car I'd paid for, Dahlia's gaze met mine, one last time. No words were needed. Her smirk said it all. I was finished. I moved into a small apartment, faded wallpaper, clanging pipes, a groaning refrigerator. Every corner felt like defeat. I worked odd jobs to survive, too proud to accept money from Caleb or Mom even though they offered. I drank more than I should have and stared at the walls more than a man should. Those 6 months were the darkest of my life. Silence pressed on me harder than noise ever had. It wasn't just losing the house or the money, it was losing Marina. She had looked at me, a man who'd given his all, and decided I wasn't enough. The settlement left me nearly bankrupt. I tried to keep the construction business together, but without resources. Projects stalled, and clients drifted away. Some even whispered that Marina and her mother were right, that I was finished. It felt like the world watched me collapse and I couldn't stop it. Dahlia didn't miss a chance to twist the knife. One afternoon after the mansion transfer was finalized, She intercepted me in the parking lot. Her perfume was sharp, her voice cut like a blade. I told Marina you'd never amount to anything. You proved me right. Men like you always fall back into the mud where they belong. She turned away with the smugness of someone who believes victory is permanent. I stood gripping my fists until my nails dug into my palms. Her words echoed in my head every night. You will never amount to anything. My mother tried to comfort me, the only way she knew: casseroles and a steady faith. A man's worth isn't his house or bank account, she'd say. It's his heart. She looked at me with compassion, but I could see the worry. Caleb was less gentle. He came to my apartment with a six-pack and said bluntly, "You're letting them win. Dahlia grows stronger every time you drown in self-pity. You think you're beaten. No, brother, you're still breathing, and as long as you're breathing, you can fight." He was right, but at the time his words stung more than they helped. The days blurred. Roof patches, fence repairs. The kind of work that barely keeps a man afloat. Paychecks vanished with rent and bills. Nights were worse. I stared at old photos of Marina and me, haunted by her smile, because it was the woman I'd married, not the woman who'd left. Pride kept me from calling her. And there was her final line in the kitchen: "You'll never be more than a failed dreamer." Those words formed a wall between us. I could not climb. One evening I passed the mansion. Warm lights glowed and, for a moment, I pictured walking through the front door and hearing Marina call my name. Then I saw another car in the driveway. Someone I didn't recognize. It hit me. She was moving on with someone who fit Dahlia's standard. I watched from the shadows until the cold night drove me back to my apartment. That was when it finally registered. My marriage wasn't broken. It was buried. I grew bitter toward Harold Crestwood, Marina's father. I'd only met him a few times. Quiet, distant, he hadn't interfered much. And I assumed he'd sided with Dahlia. I lumped him with the rest of them, cursed him in my heart. I kept going through the motions, but felt myself disappearing piece by piece. Then came the knock. Not the usual midday noise. A firm, deliberate knock. I opened the door to a man in a tailored navy suit, carrying a polished black briefcase. "Mr. Rar?" he asked. Yes. He introduced himself as Simon Dillard, an attorney representing Harold Crestwood. He said Harold wanted to meet and believed he had something that belonged to me. Harold's name tightened my stomach. I hadn't spoken to him in years and had assumed, wrongly perhaps, that he agreed with Dahlia. Why now? Simon said Harold wanted to explain in person and offered to take me to him. I looked around my apartment, stained carpet, peeling paint, empty bottles, and nearly shut the door. But curiosity won. If Harold had something that belonged to me, I needed to know what it was. We drove in silence. Simon's car smelled faintly of leather. I watched the city pass rundown shops, busy sidewalks. 30 minutes later, we stopped before a large brick house, stately but modest compared to the Crestwood mansion. Simon led me into a study lined with bookshelves. Harold sat behind a desk, silver-haired and steady. He rose, gripped a cane, and said, "Ethan, thank you for coming." He placed his hand on the briefcase on the desk, but didn't open it. Then he looked me in the eye and said, "I know what my wife has done. I know what Marina has done, and I know what you have lost. You may think I stood aside and agreed with them, but that is not the truth." His words stopped me. I sat forward, waiting, unsure where he was going with this. Harold continued, his voice steady but firm. "I have something that belongs to you, something that should have been yours all along. I didn't intervene before, but I can't stay silent any longer. It's time you received what you've earned." My pulse quickened as he reached for the briefcase. The sound of the latches echoed through the quiet room. My eyes stayed fixed on the case as it slowly opened. It sat on Harold's desk like a sealed vault. My heart pounded as he lifted the lid. Inside lay a thick stack of documents bound neatly, with several old photographs tucked into a folder. Harold pushed the briefcase toward me. "Go on," he said evenly. I reached out with unsteady hands and lifted the papers. At first I couldn't grasp what I was holding. They looked official, filled with legal language, seals and signatures. I flipped through page after page, my eyes widening as the words sank in. Deeds, shares, ownership transfers, records of assets worth millions tied to land developments across California. My name was on them. I looked at Harold, my voice breaking slightly. What is this? He leaned back in his chair, resting his cane against the desk. It's what you earned years ago. You didn't know it then, but your work for me was far more valuable than you realized. Those developments would never have succeeded without your designs, your oversight, your hands. You didn't just build houses, Ethan. You built empires, and no one ever gave you credit. My throat went dry. I ran my fingers over the documents, still trying to process. Why are you giving this to me now? Marina and her mother made sure I left with nothing. Why step in after all this time? Harold's eyes darkened. Because I've watched in silence while Dahlia poisoned my family. I've seen how she manipulated Marina, convincing her that status and wealth matter more than character. I stayed out of it thinking it wasn't my place, but after the divorce, after I saw how far she went to destroy you, I couldn't stand by any longer. This was always meant for you, not for them. His words hit me hard. For months I had carried the weight of defeat, believing I was worthless, believing Dahlia's voice when she said I'd never amount to anything. And here was Marina's father, the man I thought had dismissed me as a failure, handing me proof that I had always been more than I imagined. I don't know what to say, I whispered. Harold's tone softened, though his expression remained firm. Say you'll rise again. Say you won't let their cruelty bury you. You've been broken, Ethan, but a man like you was never meant to stay broken. This is your chance to stand taller than ever. Tears welled in my eyes. I hadn't cried since leaving the mansion, but the emotion was too strong to hold back. My hands trembled as I set the papers down and covered my face for a moment. Relief, disbelief, and gratitude surged through me. I forced myself to look up at Harold again. Why me? You could have left this for Marina. You could have let Dahlia take it all. No one would have stopped you. A faint, almost sad smile crossed his face. Because Marina never understood what mattered. And Dahlia only ever wanted control. But you, Ethan, you respected me. You respected the work. When others saw me as a checkbook, you treated me as a man. You listened. You asked for advice. You built with integrity, not shortcuts. I never forgot that. I won't let my legacy pass into hands that don't value it. The room went quiet. I stared at the documents, feeling as if the ground beneath me had shifted. For so long, I had believed my story was over, that I'd been reduced to failure. Now, in minutes, my future had been rewritten. Harold broke the silence. This isn't a gift. It's recognition. You earned this. All I ask is that you use it well. Build again. Prove to yourself what I already know. I nodded, my chest swelling with a pride and determination I thought I had lost forever. I will. I won't waste this chance. Harold studied me closely, then gave a single nod. Good. That's all I needed to hear. Simon, the lawyer, stepped forward and explained the details. The value of the shares, the process of transferring ownership, the immediate access to certain assets. His tone was calm, but my mind was spinning. Every word confirmed this was real, a second chance in my hands. As the meeting ended, Harold rose slowly with his cane. He extended his hand. I stood and gripped it firmly, feeling the strength in his weathered palm as his gaze held mine. Don't thank me, he said quietly. Prove me right. I left that house carrying the documents, my heart pounding. For the first time in months, something powerful stirred inside me. It wasn't just hope, it was a fire. A drive to reclaim everything that had been taken, and to rise beyond what Dahlia and Marina ever thought possible. Back in my apartment, I looked at the peeling walls and sagging mattress. I knew I wouldn't be here much longer. The life I'd been clinging to was already behind me. In my hands, I held the key to a future I thought I'd lost forever. When I walked out of Harold Crestwood's study, I knew my life would never be the same. For months I'd lived in defeat, letting others' words define my worth. But in one afternoon, Harold reminded me that worth isn't handed down by others. It's earned by how a man lives and how he treats people. I spread the documents across my kitchen table and read for hours, letting the reality sink in. These weren't scraps. They were opportunities, assets that gave me the means to rebuild. More important than the money was the validation that I mattered, that my work had value, and that my life wasn't defined by Dahlia's contempt or Marina's betrayal. The first thing I did was call Caleb. He answered on the second ring, his voice full of concern as always, since the divorce. "You holding up, brother?" I laughed, a sound I hadn't made in months. "Better than you think. I just left Harold's house. He gave me something I never expected." Caleb drove over that night. When he saw the papers, he shook his head in disbelief, then clapped me on the shoulder so hard my glass spilled. "I told you, you weren't done. You were never done." His words filled me with strength. For the first time in a long while, I felt proud to meet my brother's eyes. With Harold's support and the assets he handed me, I started again. I reopened my construction business, this time with new resources and a deeper determination. The first projects felt like redemption. Every nail hammered, every beam lifted, every wall set reminded me I wasn't a failure. I was a builder, and I always had been. My crews saw it too. They noticed the fire in me, the drive to lead, and they followed it. Within a year, my company was thriving again. I moved out of that apartment, once a symbol of survival. I no longer needed to survive. I needed to live. I bought a modest home near the coast. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. Each morning, looking out the window, I saw possibility instead of defeat. My mother, Irene, visited often. She brought casseroles, hugged me tight, and said, "I knew you'd rise again." Her pride meant more than any house or fortune. As for Marina and Dahlia, I heard their lives didn't unfold as planned. The mansion became a burden, its upkeep too costly without my steady income. Rumors reached me that Marina grew restless, and Dahlia's sharp tongue began to wear thin even with her own daughter. I never sought revenge. I never gloated. Their lives were no longer my concern. My victory wasn't in their downfall, but in my recovery. The biggest lesson I carried was this: a man's worth isn't measured by the approval of others. It isn't in the wealth he holds, or the house he lives in. Worth is proven in how he treats people, in his integrity, and in his ability to keep building even after everything falls apart. Harold saw that in me even when I couldn't see it myself. His belief gave me the chance to start again, but it was up to me to make something of it. Looking back on those dark months in that apartment, I remember the weight of despair and feeling my life had ended. Now, standing on the other side, I see those months as the foundation for everything that followed. Pain became the fire that forged me stronger. Loss became the soil where new growth began. If there's one truth I want to share, it's this: no matter who turns their back on you, no matter how loudly someone insists you're nothing, they don't define you. You define yourself by how you rise after the fall. I'm Ethan Rohr. I stand here not as the man Dahlia called a failure, but as the man who proved her wrong, by living, building, and rising again. And now I turn to you, the ones listening to my story. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own strength in the face of betrayal, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like this video, so others can find it. Leave a comment and tell me what you think. Or share a time when you had to rise from nothing. And if you want more stories like this one, subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next chapter. Your support keeps these stories alive. And just as Harold once said to me, I'll say to you, rise.